26 shops at Rio Verde. I will turn it over to Tom and Darren for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is zoning case Z 2022-221, the shops at Rio Verde in District 2. This is a request to rezone 16.8 acres at the southwest corner of Rio Verde Drive and 174th Street in the Rio Verde area from Rural 43 to C2 CUPD. The request will allow for the future development of the site for the neighborhood commercial uses. At this time, I'd like to iterate, the subject of this request is the zoning of the property. At this time, there is no specific plan of development. There's been some discussion out there about specific plans of development. This request is specifically about the land uses on the property and the zoning of the site itself. Currently, the site is vacant. The request includes a CUPD that it will allow for the prohibition of certain uses that may not be compatible with the character of the area itself. The goal of this rezoning is for neighborhood-oriented retail uses on the site. It also allows for a modification to the design standard for screen walls. So currently the regulation would be 6 feet. This would allow for the ability to construct a screen wall around the site of 8 feet as needed per the design of a specific plan. Subject parcel, as we're discussing this, it's a rezoning case, so the land use of the property is what we're discussing now. So it's important to take a look at the comprehensive plan and specifically the Rio Verde Foothills area plan. That area plan was formulated and approved in 2005. At that, the land use section of that plan, the map designates this site for rural residential uses 0 to 1 dwelling units per acre. At the time of the plan, there was significant discussion regarding the development of the 20-acre area that makes up that Rio Verde plan. The Rio Verde area has two specific types of land uses that are happening. On the eastern edge, we have the Rio Verde Foothills, which is very rural in nature. It has a lot of equestrian uses. 1 acre properties up to 5 acre properties. As you come to the eastern edge of the area, you're into the master plan. There are 3 master plans on the eastern edge with Trilogy, Tano Verde, and Rio Verde. Those master plans allow for mixtures of densities and mixtures of land uses. At the time of the plan, the horizon of that plan, as it was approved in 2005, was looking out 10 to 15 years. There's a growth section, a land use section, and an economic development section that discusses future land uses and the potential for what may need to have discussions in the future. At the time of the plan, it was anticipated that by 2020 there would be 6,700 people within the planning area. In the 2000 census, the population of the Rio Verde area was 778 individuals, representing about 730 homes. By the time the plan was adopted, there were 1,800 homes in that area, or the 1,800, the population was about 1,800 people. The plan forecast based on growth models that by 2020, we'd be looking at approximately 6,700 people living in the area. Staff pulled the issuance of building permits for residential development. We looked at census data. There were approximately 26 to 2,700 residential permits issued in the Rio Verde area over the last 15 years. That would represent approximately 6,300 persons given the occupancy rate of 2.4 units per acre. So we're at the threshold that was envisioned by the general plan of 6,700 people. The area plan also anticipated this discussion to occur by 2020. Page 98 of that plan, where did I put it? States that based on the projected 6,700 planning area residents by the year 2020, the commercial land use ratio listed above, which that ratio is approximately 8 acres per 1,000 people for residential, it is estimated that a minimum of 54 acres of commercial land would be needed to support the population by 2020. This request is for 16.8 acres. The significance of 16.8 acres is traditionally there are typically 3 levels of density in a commercial development. You have neighborhood-oriented retail, community-oriented, and regionally oriented. The neighborhood-oriented retail uses are typically oriented towards the immediate and surrounding area. They're typically less than 20 acres. So that site is consistent with what is anticipated based on the growth in the area. It is consistent with what we see based on the size of the area that's being requested to be rezoned. Further, the land use element includes a commercial analysis on page 40 that states in the future, neighborhood retail may be appropriate if the population growth warrants. Also, in the economic development section, it states by 2020, there may be some potential for limited scale neighborhood retail or some development in the Rio Verde Drive. So in essence, the request before the board today is exactly what the plan anticipated back in 2005, that we would be having a land use discussion regarding appropriate locations for commercial uses, neighborhood retail commercial uses within that Rio Verde area. As I previously discussed, that there are two types of development. There's the very low density rural areas towards the west, and on the eastern edge, we have the master plan communities. Those master plan communities where a majority of that density is located within the area. So the location of this site is immediately south of the Trilogy master plan and will be immediately north of the future phase of the Tano Verde master plan, and also just to the Rio Verde area. So the immediate surrounding area that this is intending to serve would be that eastern edge. The subject site is located adjacent to, oh, I already got that part. There has been significant neighborhood input on this request. Staff has received and passed on to this board, even updating today in the memo you've received, emails, letters, petitions. There's a change.org survey that was out there. Staff was able to identify 441 unique individuals on those petitions and surveys. The change.org survey had a new over 600 participants. It's unable to identify where those participants were, but there is some input on that change.org survey. Of the 441 individuals that we were able to identify, 225 are in opposition to the request, and 216 are in support of the request. Of all those who submitted comment, only 145 included addresses. So we're able to map that out. And as you can see, this represents 145 unique addresses. Support's primarily coming from the master plan communities, where opposition is primarily coming from the rural areas in the foothills. The concerns included a few different things. I'll highlight a few of the major ones. The first one, preservation of the rural character of the area. Condition E, or stipulation E, as recommended by the commission, includes a prohibition of land uses. The CUPD lists, I think as I mentioned earlier, the CUPD includes prohibition of certain commercial uses that would normally be entitled with C2 zoning that would not be allowed on this site per that overlay. The availability of water in the area, the Rio Verde has been a discussion of access to water. This is in the EPCOR service area. EPCOR has issued a will serve letter. They indicate they will have the capacity and the infrastructure to serve this site at the time of specific development. Traffic is another concern. Primary access into and out of this area is up and down Rio Verde Drive. McDOT has been contacted on this and has shared no concerns regarding the zoning of the property. Condition or stipulation F will require a traffic impact study at the time of specific plan of development. That plan of development will be approved and evaluated for any needed infrastructure that would be required per our regulations regarding traffic and transportation issues. Rio Verde Drive is a identified and planned 4-lane minor arterial street. At the moment, it is currently a 2-lane street or road, but there is 100 foot of right-of-way on either side of that center line for future development as development requires. Lighting, stipulation C, as recommended by the commission, also includes provisions for light mitigation requirements that would be consistent with the light ordinance and actually exceed some of our standards from that light ordinance. There was also some concern raised about the potential for fueling stations and environmental impacts. A fueling station is one of the allowed uses that would be allowed within that C2 zoning. We've reached out, ADEQ, it has regulations that regulate how those storage tanks are installed, how they're monitored. We also received comments from EPCOR that reiterates that same message, and they've said that they have no significant concerns regarding the regulations of those within their service area. The P&Z Commission met at their June 8th meeting, recommended approval with a vote of 6-1, and I will take any questions that the board might have for me at this time.
Well, let me, this is not in my district. It's in my county, but it's not in my district. So I will go over to Supervisor Galvin. This is wholly within your district. Would you like to ask any questions right now or continue on?
Not at the moment, but I just want to express my appreciation to staff for their work on this item and also taking into account the considerable attention and feedback we've received from the community. I really appreciate all of the emails that people have been sending into my office. I've read every single one, and that's in the hundreds. I might have questions for you later.
Okay.
But Mr. Chairman, I think we do have some
Yeah.
speaker slips, and the applicant wants to make a presentation.
Great. So before I bring up the applicant, currently on the, there's no one on the internet waiting to speak. Am I correct?
Chairman, I believe we have 4 that have registered for the webinar.
For the webinar to speak, okay. So before we go that route, how many do you have in, have you split them up between pro and pro and opposed?
Yes, we have approximately 13 in opposition and 18 in favor.
Oh, okay, 18 in favor and 13, and we don't know what the webinar people, we don't know the position they have, or is that including?
That is including the people on the webinar. Their forms are also in here.
So, okay, so 18, 13, and then an application. So it's hot, you guys, and you guys have all traveled a long way to be here. At least air conditioning's working perfectly in here. But I do know that all of our time, especially yours, is valuable. So what I will do is I'll bring up the applicant first. If the applicant would like to make a presentation. Good morning.
Good morning.
How long do you think your presentation will go?
Mr. Chair, 10 minutes or less.
10 minutes or less. So if you could run a little bit of a timer, because you obviously are a pro of the change. So we're gonna go ahead and time that. I want to just be fair with it. With something like this where it's almost 50-50, I want to make sure everybody is treated fairly. The P&Z has told us exactly what the project consists of, and the steps associated with it. So that, to me, is agnostic. This is just the project that's in front of us to vote on. So with that, please take us through your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like any good attorney, I can talk very quickly, so not a problem. Wendy Riddell with the law firm Barry Riddell, 6750 East Camelback. My pleasure to be here this morning on behalf of Park West to talk about the shops at Rio Verde. So the site we're talking about, as staff pointed out, is 16.84 net acres. It is directly on Rio Verde Drive. It is immediately south of the Trilogy Master Plan and on the hard corner of 174th. I'll point out immediately to our east is planned to be a future church site. So Park West, they're an Arizona-based company founded back in 1976. They hold a large and diverse portfolio of real estate. I've got John Railing and Stuart Jean here with me. They are very experienced developers, and in particular have a lot of experience in developing retail shopping centers, particularly neighborhood-oriented retail shopping centers such as proposed here today. So to give you an idea of the character of those centers, you can see a project here by Park West, Tatum Plaza, the southeast corner of Cave Creek Road and Tatum Boulevard, very similar to what we are proposing here. And you'll see another one, Cave Creek Crossing, at the southwest corner of Cave Creek Road and Carefree Highway. Again, very experienced developers here in the area. As staff noted, we're here requesting a zone change, talk about land use to C2 CUPD. The CUPD has been incorporated so that we can restrict undesirable land uses as part of this application, and also to give us the ability to implement design guidelines and design standards to ensure that this is compatible with the surrounding area. A plan of development is not part of this application, but certainly is something that will be forthcoming. So to give you an idea of what that could look like, you see a planned shopping center with a variety of uses. You'll notice a larger anchor building with several commercial pads and shops. It might look a lot like a grocer to you. And again, you'll see the CUPD, we've allowed to do an 8-foot solid wall to screen the development as appropriate through the site plan development process. We'll make that determination. So what this proposal may include is grocery store, hardware, tack and feed, drive-through restaurants, full-service restaurants, bank, coffee shop, convenience store, gas station, retail, medical, and office uses. Importantly, what it will not include, and again, this is regulated through the CUPD, is any of these undesirable uses. And it's everything from adult-oriented businesses all the way down billboards, medical marijuana facilities, recovery. All of these uses are prohibited from being on the site. And certainly you can't talk about Rio Verde without talking about water. As staff correctly pointed out, we do have a will serve, intent to serve approval from EPCOR on this site. So this site has the water that it needs. As I mentioned, we have detailed design guidelines associated with this that ensure a modern rural style of architecture. It has that soft, neutral color palette, again, to make sure it's compatible with the surrounding area, natural type of materials. We also have landscape standards to ensure it's sensitive and will, again, complement and contribute to the surrounding environment. There's a 25-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the residential properties. Staff has also correctly pointed out, but it bears repeating, that the Rio Verde Foothills area plan here anticipated this very type of use. In fact, we're a little bit behind schedule. By 2020, that there's some potential for limited small-scale neighborhood retail development. Again, exactly what we are proposing here. Again, this is consistent with that area plan, providing that much-needed retail and commercial services to the residents, stimulating the economy, and done in a way that is compatible with the surrounding area through design and through the CUPD. It's probably also worth noting that there is a food island out here. You have to travel quite a healthy distance to get to a grocery store. I mean, it's 16 miles to get to a grocery store from this site. 14.2 if you're shopping at AJ's, 20 miles if you're looking to go to a Safeway. So it's quite a distance, and why we believe there is such a need here. So it's also worth pointing out that in the gas stations, the closest gas station is 8.5 miles from the site. So again, quite a distance to travel for gas. That's part of why we feel very confident that there is such a need out here within this community. Again, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval. Mr. Chair, with that, I'll reserve the remainder of my time for rebuttal. Happy to answer any questions. We do respectfully request your approval and, of course, agree with the stipulations from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Well, that, I think you brought that in under 5 minutes, so that's good.
Told you I could talk fast.
So before I have you take a seat and hang back, Supervisor Galvin, do you have any questions at this point?
I don't at this time, but I'm going to reserve time for questions later. Thank you.
Okay, great. If you have a seat.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Chairman, would you like for me to bring these to you, or would you like me to call?
Well, let me see.
Okay, I'll bring these to you. But just for the record, I would like to also just report that our office received email comments in support, 36 email comments in support, and 24 comments in opposition, and all of these email comments were shared with the board offices.
Okay, thank you. So, in opposition, okay. Okay, between everyone that's registered, it looks like we have the ability to do almost 40 minutes of speech at a 2-minute per time frame. So that's what we usually do here. So what I'm going to do is bring up, because we heard from the applicant for 5 minutes, I'll bring up a couple in opposition on the front end. Most of you know each other. Most of you know who's in opposition. Most of you know who's in favor. I will guide you this way. be prepared that if you're going to come up and you're going to say the same things that we've already heard, I'm probably going to stop you, okay? Like I said, your time's valuable too, but if we're going to go over the same things, I think Supervisor Galvin has heard the pros and the cons, but what I'll do is start at least to spend about 3 speaker slips right now against on the opposition, okay? And that'll catch up to the pros, and then we'll slowly go in order, and I'll just go that route. If there's somebody that hears what they were going to say and want to opt out, if there's some of you that would like to say, hey, there's 3 leaders in the no and 3 leaders in the positive, if you want to self-select that because you feel that will get your voice heard too and save time, that would be appreciated. But again, you've taken your time to come here and speak with us, so I don't want to stop anybody from saying what they want to say prior to seeking a motion and a vote, okay? So with that, we'll start with again, in opposition. And I'll just go at the front end here. Handed to me in order, Cody Rhyme. Cody Rhyme. Is he here or is he on the
webinar?
On the webinar. If we can bring up Cody. Cody, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I apologize. I'd love to be there, but I am out of state right now.
That's very well, but we hear you. So you have 2 minutes to address the board, so welcome.
Yep, Cody Ryan. My address is 16925 East Dixoletta, Rio Verde, Arizona 85263. This proposed development is about 1.5 miles to 2 miles from my home. Thanks to the supervisors for your time today. To be frank, approving this rezoning from RU43 to C2 would not align with previous governing actions for our area from the same board. In reference to Z 2022-221, the Planning and Zoning Commission was not unanimous in approval. I and many others in Rio Verde Foothills purchased my home while being fully aware of the RVF area plan, which was adopted in 2005. And the owners which are seeking this rezoning also clearly were aware of the area plan. It was referenced in their application. I'm not one who wishes to dictate what private property owners do with their land. However, this community, along with previous governing bodies, came together and adopted a plan for our area, which, if respected and adhered to, has and would continue to serve to preserve this very special place we all call home. The area plan was adopted in 2005 with an outlook to 2020. Our community has been more than preoccupied with a very serious and dire crisis for the better part of 3 years. We have been attempting to obtain a reliable short and long-term water source for our homes. Therefore, the timing of this rezoning is a bit suspicious and has no less caught us off guard. If this is to be done, I propose it be done the right and honorable way. Allow our current residents of Rio Verde Foothills the same privileges previous generations had, and work with us to update and affirm the current area plan and extend the outlook another 15 to 20 years. If the community then wishes to include and allow C2 zoning as a provision in an updated area plan, then so be it. But please do not force this change on us in the way it is being rushed through, especially not while we are living under such a perilous water crisis as we are today. Thank you for your time.
That was perfect timing, Cody. So thank you for that, for sticking to the 2 minutes. I appreciate it. And then no applause. Okay, so thank you. We'll go next to the next in opposition. Apparently maybe on the webinar as well, Mr. David Taylor. Is that true? Because it's white? Is he here or on the internet?
Chairman, I don't show him as being remote on the webinar.
Okay, well, I have a speaker slip. Is he not here? David Taylor. Okay, we'll move on. Next up is Mr. Joe Stock. Mr. Joe Stock.
I'm going to opt out.
Okay. Perfect, thank you, Joe. Next up then, into the 6-minute level is Mr. John Jovis or Jonas? Jovis? And then if I can have Ruth Kaplan come up and stand behind you so we can go to her next. If Ruth Kaplan. Okay, welcome,
Morning.
Mr. Jonas. Good morning.
I have a short statement.
Okay.
My name is John Joas, Jouas. I reside at 35607 North 138th Way in Scottsdale. Zip is 85262. My neighbors and I all moved to the foothills so we could leave the city behind. We all knew that we would not have the conveniences of municipal water, sewer, trash pickup, fire service, hydrants, bus routes, and restaurants within 5 minutes. Even more importantly, we left behind many malls, office buildings, and retail centers. Now in our community, a developer wants to come in and bring all that with them, exactly what we came out there to avoid. There are 3 small communities which have been covered, Rio Verde, Trilogy, and Foothills. Trilogy was built as a lock and leave development, and the median age in the town of Rio Verde is 70.5. A large majority of these citizens leave for the summer. There are 2 restaurants within 1 mile of these communities and a shopping center 8 miles away, which offers a drugstore, 2 banks, a tax store, a UPS, a few restaurants, and a gas station. There are vacancies at the shopping center, and the restaurants, since I've been there, which has been like the last 16 years, have turned over multiple times, some of them 3 and 4 times. Anything else that you need is available, through Uber Eats or Amazon, which can be delivered to your doorstep within 24 hours. This is the last truly rural horse country within the city limits. If this application is approved, that all goes away, as it will open the door for future development and the foothills will become like every other city. That's it.
Great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ms. Kaplan. And I'll have a couple, we'll wait for the pros because the pros, who's on the webinar, I'll let them go first so I don't have to queue them up. So welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Tom. We've met. I'm Ruth Kaplan. I live at 16206 East Windstone Trail in Scottsdale in the Rio Verde foothills. My husband and I chose Rio Verde, as everyone says. It's a unique environment, specifically designed around horse people. We include, and I represent the horse community. There's a lot of backyard horse people. We also have some of the most high-class facilities and trainers, world-class trainers in the world live in our community. They moved here because of its unique situation. It's private, it's quiet, it's scenic, it's very slow-paced. We all knew moving out here there were no amenities right at our doorstep. That's what we want. It's easy for us to get in and out with our horse trailers, especially in times of crisis. We can load and go. You keep adding all these new developments with no improvements to the road structure, it's going to be critical for us. We just faced this situation with a fire in our neighborhood just a couple of weeks ago. It was nearly catastrophic. If that wind had blown the fire north, it would have ruined our community. We moved here with the desire to live in a rural community. These folks that move into these golf courses, these planned housing developments, they knew that when they bought that property. They only live there part-time. We're full-time. This is where we live. This is where we choose to live. It's an easy drive to get to any of the things that we need. Please respect our desire to remain rural. We don't want the intrusion of commercial development. It's absolutely not necessary or wise.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, I am going to go on to, that was about 6 minutes in opposition and 6 minutes from the applicant. So I think we're trying to be as fair as we can to hear everybody with the way this is running. So thank you for your help with that. We are going to go now to a couple in favor. I'll go to the white. So I believe this means that they're on the webinar. Okay. Mr. Vince DePietro. Maybe it's DePietro. So are you with us today?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to articulate our firm's support for this project. We bought in Trilogy in 2019. We reside on Cindacone Road. We live in a growing and vibrant community that deserves the best amenities and services. We have a lot of potential to attract more residents, businesses, and visitors, but we also face some challenges. And one of them is a lack of convenient and diverse shopping options in our local area. We are excited about the new shopping center project that has been proposed by the developer. This project will bring many benefits to the Verde community, such as one, will create more jobs and economic opportunities for local residents and entrepreneurs. Two, will provide more choices and convenience for shoppers and consumers. Three, will enhance the livability and attractiveness of our community. And four, will improve the infrastructure and transportation network in our area and will generate more tax revenue and funding for public services and amenities. The new shopping center will be a modern and sustainable facility that will complement the existing character and charm of our development. It will feature a mix of local and national retailers, restaurants, entertainment venues, services, and public spaces. The developer has also committed to working closely with the community to ensure that the project meets our needs and expectations. They have conducted extensive consultations and surveys with the residents and businesses. And they have also incorporated feedback and suggestions into the design and planning.
Thank you, Mr. Del Pietro. Thank you for joining us today. You're at the 2-minute limit. I appreciate you joining us today. Okay, we'll next go on to Miss Elizabeth Shaw, also registered on the webinar. Miss Shaw, are you here? No, Miss Shaw? Oh, she wants to rejoin at a later time so we can continue to move. Also on the webinar is Miss Karen. Boy, I need to wear those cheaters. Miss Trott, I believe. Karen Miss Trott would like to speak in favor, and she has an address also in the Rio Verde community. Miss Trott. Okay. Can I move on then with the webinar? Yes. Okay. So it was a game try there. So I'll still stay in the favor column. Give me your glasses, Jack. Jeez. Sorry. That is awesome. Oh my God. I'm gonna tell my wife to get me some of these. Mr. Arthur Doloresco. Mr. Arthur Doloresco, if you're here, if you'd like to speak. Can I use these for a little bit, Jack? Sure. Okay.
Good morning, Mr.
Welcome.
Chairman, board members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give you a few comments, hopefully not redundant, but in favor of the project. First and foremost, I am a full-time resident at Trilogy Verde River. My address is 17828 East Wolf Tree Lane, Rio Verde 85263. I lived for 18 years at True North. And the convenience of that little shopping center was incredible for the folks who live there. This will be incredible for the folks who not only live there now, but will be living there in the future. The growth of this area is inevitable, and this is an opportunity, I believe, not necessarily to attract more, but at least service those folks who are there. So I simply wanted to let you know that when I moved there, the first question I asked my realtor was whether or not there was a grocery store here. All of them lowered their eyes, lowered their heads, and said no. I moved there anyway because I believe in this community. I believe in this neighborhood, and more importantly, I believe in the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today and making the drive. I appreciate it. We'll do one more one more in favor. This person lives apparently in Trilogy. Mr. Theodore Marisak? Did I get that right? Yes. Okay. Welcome today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for hearing me.
Sure.
My address is 17344 East Woolsey Way in Trilogy, and I am a full-time resident. What we have here is a food desert. The time to get to either Fountain Hills or into an area where you have shopping is roughly 30 minutes. The shopping center is part of the current plan and is always was there. But it is not the first commercial entity. The first commercial entity is Trilogy, where I live. We have Needle Rock, we have the spa, and we have Eddie's restaurant. And I was on the committee for Trilogy, and 40% of all people that come to the restaurant and bar are from outside the community. So it is viable. People do come there. They come to the spa. And 30%, 30 to 50%, the people that come to the spa are from outside the community. So this commercial endeavor across the street would just be an extension to what is already there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, I'm going to have a couple of the opposition queue up so we can continue to move through this effectively. I just asked Tom, and he couldn't make out this name either, the first name either, but the last name is Morales, and I don't want to mess this up. So I will also invite Stacy Weiss to come up and Carmela Lizzo to come up and queue up. So thanks, Ms. Morales, for joining us today. Well, how do you say?
Hello.
Hello. How do you say your first name?
Rondi.
Rondi. Okay.
And my mom made it up.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Mom. I own a piece of property in near Hawks Nest. It's north of Carefree off of 136th. So I do have a lot in Rio Verde. I'm also an attorney. I practice real estate law. I have an office in Carefree. I'm going to go as fast as I can like the other lawyer did. I'm more focused on what they don't tell you as what they do, and as opposed to what they do tell you when I'm talking about being in an opposition to a project. They're not telling you that they actually have water. They're telling you that they have some sort of intent to serve or will serve or whatever. They do not tell you what they're going to do. We might do this, we might do that. Well, they want to change from a rural, very rural zoning into a very intense zoning without telling you what they're going to do. They're not telling you. So they want you to rubber stamp a C on there so they can sit there and think about it. Here's the problem. I said, I've seen the developments that this developer has done. I have a house in Tatum Ranch. I see it. It's not great, I'm telling you. It's so hot. It's all pavement. It's not properly, what would I say, treed up or covered. It's over-retailed, and that's the problem with the valley. It's over-retailed. What Miss Ruthie was saying is so pertinent. I really want you to listen to her. We have elite horse people that you can't find anywhere in the world. We have horses that are trained, elite horses. They're reiners and cutters. You can't find them anywhere in the world. You know that show Yellowstone, where they're doing another 666, something like that, Ruthie? They actually bring people from our community in Rio Verde to help teach Taylor Sheridan how to do what he wants to do. They actually have people in our community that are on set. If we continue to be a sprawl community, which is exactly what this is going to do, and I know I'm running out of time, we're going to push out our great equestrians. They're not going to have anywhere else to go. And my last thing I want to say is that these Trilogy and these other places, they have plenty of room to put their little grocery store in their own developments. They don't have to flip another use. They absolutely do not have to.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today. Okay. Ms. Weiss, please come up. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Stacy Weiss. I live at 17332 East Quail Track Road in Rio Verde. I am speaking in opposition to the proposed rezoning. You heard some folks speak of the convenience of increasing services to the area. They are neglecting to mention those increased services will increase commercial traffic to the area. Currently, that is on a 2-lane road. There would be required improvements to the infrastructure. The current plan that has been shared, it may not be on the proposal for now with the rezoning, but it has been publicized. It's actually in brochures in sales department in some of the master plan communities, shows 2 points of egress onto 174th. 174th is a privately maintained roadway. I live off of 174th. Currently, when there are monsoons, heavy rains, there are washes on the roads that can be 12 to 18 inches deep. My husband, a couple of our other neighbors with tractors, they maintain that road so that people can get home without destroying their vehicles. The proposed commercial development or the plan for that development, there's additional costs associated to increase the infrastructure. Those costs cannot be placed on the homeowners. It needs to be considered when redevelopment is happening, and I don't believe that that has been proposed in this initial proposal. So it's imperative that this body enforces all of those impact fees and the financial burden that could come to taxpayers with redevelopment. And I want to be clear that although the proposed development on the commercial site has water, it shares boundaries with property owners that currently do not. Literally would back to their backyards that do not. It's irresponsible to approve commercial development until the water situation is resolved with more than a Band-Aid. So the current plan for rezoning and developing the properties at 174th and Rio Verde would provide for amenities, but not essential services. So please reconsider.
Thank you for joining us today. Okay, Ms. Lizzo, thanks for joining us today.
Carmela Lizzo, President, Rio Verde Horsemen's Association, and a Rio Verde Foothills resident. Supervisor Galvin, you came to the RVHA board meeting at Silver Spurs Ranch. You drove down our dirt roads and knocked dust off your shoes when you toured the barns. You smiled when the horses nickered and reached out for a treat and said your child would love it out here. You gazed out at the vistas of Four Peaks and commented on the incredible views. You heard what quiet sounds like, and it did not include the noise of a loading dock or traffic pulling out of a parking lot. You told us how special the foothills is, how our neighborhood was so unique due to its rural nature. You drove home under a sky full of stars without a streetlight in sight on a dark country road back to the sounds and the chaos of the city. For that brief moment, you got it. You had to have felt what we feel every day when we walk outside and hear the coyotes howl and watch the sunset turn the skies crimson. So I don't understand how you or the board can even consider allowing a developer whose sole motivation and whose only intention is to make as much money as possible at our expense to come into our rural lives and pour concrete for 600 parking spaces in the middle of the desert for a nail salon and another restaurant that will be lucky to last 2 years. We've gotten feedback from Fountain Hills that many of their shops are empty. Their retail stores are struggling. There's multiple vacancies. It's also a community that has a lot of winter visitors. The Chase bank tellers 10 miles away tell us they're laying off people because the bank is empty. The development in which they're located has multiple vacancies. The commercial development 10 miles away has vacancies, and the restaurants there have gone in and out of business 3 to 4 times. Fountain Hills' population is 25,000 people, and they have a 49% office vacancy. Rio Verde has 2,300 people. You just told us 6,700, many of which are winter visitors. We don't have the population or the infrastructure. Please don't open Pandora's box and let the ugly out. Please don't pave paradise to put up a parking lot. Please don't sell us out. It will pave the way to the ruination of the Rio Verde foothills and change our community forever.
Thank you, Ms. Lizzo. No, please no applause. So the webinar has come back up, so I want to turn back to them to give them the ability to speak to us today. I will ask Elizabeth Shaw if she can join us. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
morning. I'm Elizabeth Shaw. I live in Trilogy. My husband and I bought property here 5 years ago, and we live here full time. While we realized we would need to drive 30 minutes to get our groceries for a while, we hardly believed that this would be a permanent situation. The argument that we knew what we were getting when we moved here fails to acknowledge that many of us came here fully expecting a grocery store was just a matter of time, given the area's substantial growth. A grocery store in our community is more than a matter of convenience. Almost all of my neighbors are senior citizens from our 50s into our 80s. The need for access to basic services nearby is very much needed now and will only increase as we age. In fact, a grocery store could be the difference between aging in place or being forced into assisted living for older people. And anyone who is telling you that there's a grocery store 10 minutes away doesn't live where we do. As for the rural nature of the area, these high-density golf course communities have been around the foothills since the 70s. And soon these neighborhoods, as you stated, are going to have twice as many homes as the foothills. So this is clearly an area that is both rural and residential. The proposed shopping center is sited directly adjacent to the area's high-density neighborhoods and is in keeping with their character. On the other hand, the great majority of foothills residents opposing the development live at least a mile or more from the site. Thus, any impact will be primarily borne by those in favor of these shops. Concerns like traffic on Rio Verde Drive, noise and light pollution, and so on should be taken seriously and addressed during the approval process. Finally, it's a false choice to imply that we can either keep our natural surroundings or permit any development whatsoever. What we need most at this time is the county's vision and oversight to ensure that this project is developed responsibly and with respect to this beautiful area that we all have come to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Shaw. Appreciate it. We'll go also back over, still on the webinar, then, as I called before, Ms. Karen Mistrot. Ms. Mistrot.
Hello, my name is Karen Mistro, and I also live in Trilogy at Verde River on a full-time basis, as many of us do. I actually live near the entrance to Trilogy, and I am very close to the location of the proposed commercial land. I'm in favor of this land becoming a commercial development for 3 reasons. One, my husband and I signed the contract to build our Trilogy home almost 6 years ago to this day. We made the assumption that with the planned growth slated for this area, commercial development would arrive. We welcomed that idea as it's an easy hour out of my day just driving to run to the grocery store to pick up one item. I would love to have a shopping option across the street. 2, I have been a real estate broker for over 20 years. The one thing I always tell my clients is that if there is vacant land nearby, it's buyer beware. Anything can happen unless the land is protected in some manner. The vacant land across from Trilogy is a prime location for shopping with our neighborhood, the proposed West 36 neighborhood, Tonto, Rio, Foothills residents, not to mention future developments such as Fiesta Ranch, etc. To think that nothing would be built on it would have been short-sighted on my part. I think it's interesting that a lot of people think it's okay for themselves to move here, but once they're here, all development should stop. Not sure what the reasoning would be for that, as they don't own the land. In addition, the Foothills residents oppose Trilogy, but are in our restaurant and bar on a daily basis. The third reason I'm in support is actually in regards to traffic. I drive into Scottsdale almost daily, so I'm contributing to the high traffic we're already seeing. If I had a nearby place to shop, I would go there many times instead of driving into Scottsdale. In turn, it could reduce the number of cars on Rio Verde Drive. Overall, I'm pleased with the proposed development. I would much rather have a nicely planned out shopping center than random pop-up commercial places or more homes built by wildcat builders. I would like to add, I do believe many of my neighbors are in favor of changing this zoning to commercial, but have chosen not to speak up. I was involved in the recent water issue with the ACC.
Miss Mistro, I'm sorry about butchering your name, but you're at the end of your 2 minutes. So thank you for joining us today via webinar. Okay, so I'm going to bring up 2 in opposition, and then hopefully I can talk to everybody again real quickly. So I think we've tried to be fair to make sure we've treated everyone fairly so far. So I would like to have Mr. Michael Henderson, if he would like to speak in opposition, followed by Mr. Stephen Yazanowski. If you would like to speak in opposition, we'll take your 2 comments. So welcome today, Mr. Henderson. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you. My name's Michael Henderson, resident at 17316 East Quail Track, right off the same very road that developers are seeking rezoning for. Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Supervisors, I stand before you as a concerned member of the community, also representing a petition signed by numerous full-time residents who share deep concerns in opposition to the approved zoning change at Rio Verde and 174th. Our plea to you today is obviously to reconsider. Firstly, there have been mischaracterizations of the location and proximity of amenities located under 14 miles, roughly 20 minutes away, not 30, leading to confusion among the community, and I'd imagine you as the board as well. The impact on our community is another crucial aspect that needs thorough evaluation. We've discovered that while there are a very small number of full-time residents that are in support, a large majority of the supporters of the development are not full-time residents and primarily reside outside of our community and may not truly understand the implications for us, the local full-time residents. The proposed commercial development also raises concerns about its impact on the environment, infrastructure capacity, and long-term sustainability. An unbiased evaluation of these factors is essential to ensure the well-being of our community and preservation of its unique character, as mentioned prior. As mentioned, there is an existing development about 8 miles up the road that is a quarter of the size, where about half of the development has remained vacant for years. This is surrounded by many densely populated housing communities as well. Additionally, we must carefully consider potential consequences on not only public safety, which I know we will hear more about in the future by Stephen, but also the financial burden placed on residents due to the emission of impact fees. Let me be clear, our community should in no way carry financial burden of this development. While we respect the division or the decisions of our elected representatives, we implore you to prioritize the input of full-time
Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Oh, is that
Past
it?
2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That was quick. Thank you. Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Yazanowski.
Stephen's fine, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning, County.
Bless you.
Good morning, board members. My name is Stephen Yazanowski. I live off Kell Track Road in the Rio Verde foothills. I'm here today as a private citizen, and my views expressed are my own and do not represent any organization or public agency. I'm asking for your commitment to your constituents to support sensible and sustainable development. I would like to point out that there are nearly 740 signatures who sign either online or in person in opposition to this retail center. I personally collected approximately 50 of these opposing signatures. Additionally, some of the letters in support are from surrounding master plan developments, which a great number are part-time seasonal residents. The timing of this proposed development is suspicious in the sense that it is occurring during what many consider a water crisis. Many of the signatures I collected in opposition to the proposed development were unaware of the zone change. The zone change was approved by the Zoning Commission, but they were aware of the water issues affecting the foothills. Many of the promises made by the developer include anecdotal benefits and leave out many of the blind spots. For instance, if this development mirrors surrounding commercial sites, such as the one on Alma School and Dynamite, we can reasonably conclude the only viable business would be a gas station, since most of the surrounding commercial centers have a substantial amount of vacant storefronts that are intended to provide services other than gasoline and alcohol. Gas stations typically provide alcoholic beverages, something the developer promised to exclude from the proposed site. Keep in mind the proposed site would be nearly 3 times the size of the commercial center on Alma School and Dynamite, which is mostly vacant. Other blind spots would include the traffic impact, the dedicated public safety resource, and the sanitation impact. More importantly, who's going to pay for these services and revisions? Are these amenities going to attract unlawful residency on the adjacent public land? If introduction of amenities like a gas station mirrors other unincorporated areas, I would anticipate an increase in illegal residency. Anyone who has ever used the facilities on Dynamite and Alma School may have noticed the significant amount of trash, graffiti, and traffic that a gas station attracts. This is not meant to be a derogatory observation, since the staff at these sites do their best to keep the establishment serviceable. Simply put, the staff at these sites are faced with an extreme logistic challenges. I would ask you to at least continue this until this water crisis is over, to get a real consensus of what this community will support.
Thank you for joining us today, Stephen. I appreciate it. Okay, looking in the columns, I have two left in opposition that wanted to speak, and I have 9 on the pro side, but I do want to have enough time also to have Supervisor Galvin have the time to ask the applicant, who's obviously in favor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off the names of who's left. If you have heard what you wanted to say on the pro side, and you feel that there's something that you don't feel that was heard on the pro side, you definitely can speak. But I'm going to just read off the names of who's still left to speak, and maybe you can decide with 2 people to come up, and so we can keep this even. So still to speak is Stan Wasilik. Dang it. I'll get this. Oh, an easier one. James Glenning. Charles Baird, joining us today. Carol Netta. Ron Netta. Lori Storican. Brian Thompson. Pat Bacorny. Susan Bacorny. And these are the only ones that are speaking if necessary. I don't know if that's necessary at this point, but represented here in also to speak if necessary, Pamela Johnson, Natalie Marisak. Okay. Oh, forget it. Jack. Okay, sorry, Jack. What's the last name? Gogan. Thank you for joining us today to speak if necessary. So of those people that I just read, if there's 2 of you that feel like we haven't heard something in favor, please come up to the podium, and I'll let you introduce yourself. And we have our 2. So thank you, guys. Ma'am, your name.
Thank you. My name is Carol Netta. I live at 17825 East Stocking Trail. I am a full-time resident of Trilogy Verde River, which is what all of the people here who are in favor are full-time residents. I'm aware that some of the Foothills people are not in favor of this. However, on social media, they're very vocal, and they also are in favor of nothing that is ever proposed in our area. There's a famous saying from the movie Field of Dreams, "Build it and he will come." We know all this is what will happen with the shopping center. They will frequent it just as they do our restaurant, Needle Rock. The proposed shopping center is in Rio Verde. It is not in the middle of the foothills and will definitely reduce traffic, as residents in Rio Verde will be able to shop within our own area. Some say we already have facilities within our community, such as hair and nails. We do. However, I have to make a nail appointment 6 months in advance to get the times I want. It's time to have choices for our residents and all the other people living here, so they will not have to drive the distances to either Fountain Hills or Scottsdale for shopping and services. Traveling at night on our dark roads is also challenging for our residents. There's always the fear of hitting an animal at night. When we first thought about moving here over 4 years ago, we struggled with how long it would take to get to the shopping center, at least 1/2 hour each way. We felt at that time eventually the area would grow, services and shoppings would become available because it was in the master plan. And now is the time. The Rio Verde communities are mostly older citizens who should not have to travel to get groceries and prescriptions. I am also aware that people who are coming to our community to look at purchasing a home are always asking about the possibility of shopping in the area as they see how far it is.
Ms. Netta.
I'm done. Thank you for your time.
Oh, I don't think you're done, but thank you. You brought up a topic about nail appointments. I appreciate that. That was something new I've not heard before. I'm going to go ahead. Sir, please state your name.
Brian Thompson.
Brian Thompson. Okay, Brian. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. And I'll try to keep this short because I think both sides have already presented a lot of the arguments there. But something I actually did read all the comments that were emailed in too, and something that came up quite often was the water. It's come up in here today as well. I don't understand what that has to do with the shopping center. The very first comment I said, I don't even have water brought to my house, and you want to build a shopping center? No way. So I don't see how the two are tied together there. I mean, the other argument was that the development, there's too much building, too many houses being put in there. That's not the same conversation that we're talking about today. We're talking about a shopping center. So my wife and I are building our dream house there. It won't be ready till next April. We love that area. I am a horse person, at least my parents were horse people. So we love the horses, driving through, seeing the stables. We mountain bike in Browns Ranch every weekend. Just this weekend, we're paddleboarding down at Needle Rock on the Verde River. It's such a beautiful, peaceful area. We want to maintain that. But we also want to make sure that we have a grocery store that's close by, the convenience right there. We're not into overly development there, but I think it's reasonable to expect just a grocery store without having to drive 20, 25 minutes each way, an hour round trip to get a gallon of milk. One last thing I'll say is that I used to live in Greyhawk, and when they built the Fry's down there, there was probably some opposition to that as well. I lived right around the corner from it. We saw no problem with that. If anything, it's going to reduce traffic on Rio Verde Drive because people aren't going to have to drive to the top of the hill to get their groceries. Okay. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate it. So, sir.
Oh, my name.
Oh, I did?
Yes.
What's your name?
Stan Wasilik.
Stan, please, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Stan Wasilik, I live in Trilogy full-time. Moved there about 3 years ago from living in the foothills. I lived on 136th Street on the far western edge of the foothills, also full-time. I'd like to look at this from a different perspective and talk about the implications of having something that's either nearby or not nearby. In September of last year, the Environmental Protection Agency downgraded Arizona's air quality, Maricopa, I should say, from marginal to moderate, which is from bad to worse. Every time they increase that severity rating, there are implications on businesses in terms of new regulations and restrictions. Those in turn translate to dampers on economic activity. So what's this got to do with the shops? If you take the number of households in Rio, Tonto, Trilogy, the foothills, and the new 36 West community that's now planned, and you multiply that by the number of round trips that people make every week to either Fountain Hills or to North Scottsdale, and you work that out by EPA metrics, it works out to about 2,400 tons of CO2 emissions per year. If instead those people have the choice of shopping nearby and using the same metrics, that number drops to 330 tons of CO2 emissions. So by having a place that's nearby instead of places that are farther away, we can reduce carbon emissions by over 2,000 metric tons a year.
Thank you for bringing up what we have to deal with as a board when it comes to some of these items. So I appreciate you hitting on that topic for a board consideration. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let the two left in opposition come up and speak. Not let, but invite them up. Sorry, Miss Cynthia Dooley.
I'm going to have her go first. She's my daughter, and then I'll go second.
You're letting your daughter go first. Okay. So thank you. If you both could come up, though, if you both want to speak. Is it Chantel?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Hello,
you.
I am Chantel Dooley, and I live at 17346 East Graythorn Drive in the Rio Verde foothills. And I am opposed to this development for 3 major reasons. Number 1 is along with the increase in commercial development comes the potential for the increase in crime. The closest law enforcement agencies are Fountain Hills Maricopa County Sheriff, that is 17 miles away. Scottsdale Police Department is 21 miles away, and the Phoenix Police Department is 11 miles away. Gas stations and grocery stores are open later hours, and if anything goes wrong, I am literally the property right next door to this commercial development. We would be neighbors. I'm also very concerned with the lack of vacancy. You've heard other people mention it before, but I think it warrants that when there are vacant buildings, there are open invitations for people to congregate, and without any law enforcement present to regulate or supervise that, you are putting all of your residents at risk. Those who are living in the Trilogy area are living behind a manned guard gate. We are not. There is currently no barrier. Many of us don't have any fences around our property, and we have not had a need to have a fence around our property. I also want to mention the lack of employment base. So if we are talking about putting in amenities, and I want to use the word when I say amenities, these are not necessities, that requires staffing and manpower to be able to show up and serve those of us that would patron those establishments. The median household income in all of the surrounding zip codes is in the 6 figures. These positions would be entry-level minimum wage jobs. Therefore, we would have to be incorporating and bringing in a transient population in order to keep these businesses open and sustainable. And then lastly, I want to mention the destruction of the habitat. If we build this and it's not able to be sustainable, the area in the desert will never go back to what it was before. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Dooley. And now I'll bring up your mom.
I am part with the property directly across the street. 006M is the end of that parcel number.
Okay.
And I have 5 acres behind Trilogy. We were very concerned when Trilogy was coming in as this master plan, because several master plans had already failed prior to Trilogy taking off. Because of the water, but Trilogy has a 100-year water dedicated guarantee from the fort. This same water we tried to form a DeWitt and we were denied. But I think it's a slap in the face to even consider this commercial development that has dedicated EPCOR water. I don't know what they're using for the wastewater, if they have a gigantic septic tank, when the people right across the street, we're still hauling water. We have water hauled tanks on the back of our trucks that we're bringing in. My daughter is hauling her laundry to my home in Fountain Hills. We haven't built out there because of the water issue, because we are getting older. We are horse people. We were planning to live the rest of our life out there in peace. But the water issue, we can't possibly entertain taking care of livestock. No way. We'd be bankrupt trying to feed them, water them, just normal needs. The people out there that I go visit, their rule is if it's yellow, flush it down. If it's brown, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Nobody should be living like that. We aren't worried about nail appointments. We can't even feed we take our dishwater and water our plants. I mean, we are already conserving water to being ridiculous in 2023. And I do think it's an insult for these people coming in, wanting these huge things, and they've already got their water taken care of, they've got their sewer taken care of, and yet we have no water.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you, Ms. Dooley. I appreciate you being here. And also, speak only if necessary in opposition, Ms. Lynn Swanson. So Ms. Swanson, would you like to speak?
I'd like to say one thing.
Please, come on up. You good? Mm-hmm.
I live in Rio Verde. Mm-hmm. But this thing that they want to build is going to be right in my backyard because I'm close to the edge of the desert. But the thing is, I went over to the Trilogy sales office out of curiosity. When they first opened, it started selling the homes. And at the sales office, you don't have to ask. They would tell people, oh, they're going to build all sorts of stores out here. You don't have to worry. So I've noticed that almost everybody that said they want it, they live in Trilogy. I'm not saying everyone, but most of those people live in Trilogy, and they were probably told by a sales office that it was going to be there. But when I moved out to Rio and the Tonto area, we were told it wasn't going to be built. So I just wanted to mention the fact that I think the office is what started a lot of the expectations that people have that there should be a shopping center out there. And from my personal perspective, it'll be right in my backyard, so I don't want it. And plus, when I moved out there, I knew I was in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, and I was more than happy to drive to Fountain Hills or Scottsdale because that was what I planned on. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Swanson. Okay, so we're finished with the speaker slips, and before I turn it over to questions from Supervisor Galvin, I just wanted to thank everybody in this time of, I think they're calling it the raging 20s. Everybody's mad. I just want to thank you guys. The Rio Verde community that I continue to notice operates here in this building with discourse, but with decorum. And I want to thank all of you, both on the opposition and the pro side of just this one project, just for continuing to operate in that manner here in this auditorium. You guys are getting too good at public speaking. I want to clap for you too. So when we're finished with this item and we take a vote, I'm going to let everyone file out because we still have a lot of county business to get through, a lot of different votes. But I'm hoping that Supervisor Galvin, I'm just incredibly impressed with this area and how well you guys come here and state your points and don't pull out knives and swords and stab each other. So I appreciate that as residents because you guys are neighbors. So please go outside and give yourselves a round of applause and a pat on the back because we do hear it. You heard me loud and clear. I heard different topics, something to think about all the way through this thing, on both sides, okay? So again, thanks for joining us. I'm sure that we're gonna see you again with other topics, including the water issue that we've seen before through this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Galvin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank you for the kind comments you made about the speakers we heard today. And yes, I'm always impressed but never surprised by the demeanor and the facts and the arguments that people always bring from the Rio Verde foothills and the Rio Verde community. It's been an honor of mine to represent you through these very difficult and thorny issues. And so the information you've provided to me in the emails have always been very polite, very respectful, but most of all, very informative. I do have some questions for the applicant, and I will have some questions for staff in my deliberation of this item. There was an image from either staff's presentation in recommending approval or the applicant that showed the actual location of the proposed site. That's asking for a rezone right next to Trilogy. I think it was another slide. I think it was closer up.
Probably in our presentation.
That's it. Okay. Ms. Riddell, as you saw today, these are people who have a lot of good arguments for and against the project, but there were some interesting questions that were raised. I do believe you took about 5 minutes in your presentation, so Mr. Chairman, if it's okay after my questions, if she wants to make a rebuttal quickly on any matters that you wanted to bring to our attention. But one of the things that have consistently come up in the emails, and I think what we heard today, and maybe not the exact term, but I'm going to call about it, is economic viability. People have been remarking on this facility or property that's down the road. Can you please address the arguments against your proposal today for the rezone, especially regarding vacancies that were brought up by Mr. Henderson and Mr. Yavzanovsky, and one of them said it was mostly vacant. And then I thought that Chantel Dooley just now made some very good strong arguments as well regarding economic viability. I'll put it under that rubric. So if you can answer that, and then anything you have for rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Galvin. So yes, as we look at this particular site, I mean, I think you heard from folks that there is a significant need, that you've got to travel over 8.5 miles to get to any other real commercial services. You also heard about the Alma School and Dynamite Shopping Center and the claim that it was 50% vacant. We actually called the owner and called the broker. They have a 96% occupancy rate right now. We didn't take that at face value. We actually went out and drove the site as well. And we did notice they had roughly about 5,000 square feet. If you do that math, it's a little more than the 96, closer to the high 80s. But we also noticed that that vacancy, which again, still very minimal, is almost all on the second floor of the project. So it is not a traditional neighborhood serving commercial center. It has that office type component, very different than what we're proposing, but it also yet still has a very high occupancy rate. We know that there is significant need within this community. We have been out talking to grocers and other retailers, and there is a lot of interest in developing here on this particular site because of that. You also heard from your own staff the number of housing permits, the amount of growth, the very high demographics out here in this area. You heard, in fact, as well that, concerns about traffic. Well, frankly, traffic isn't a reason not to do this. It's a reason to support this project. This isn't a destination use. This is a use that will be out here to service these very residents, a place for them to stop on the way home and get their groceries or get their gas. That will actually reduce traffic, reduce Amazon and Uber Eats trips out here. So these are, I think, there's some pretty compelling reasons, not the least of which is that this is also supported by your area plan. We heard a lot of folks saying the area plan is a reason to deny this, but the reality is it's a reason to support it. The area plan forecasted the very need in 2020 for this type of, frankly, even more commercial. This area is behind. It needs this type of commercial services, which is why you also saw such support here and in writing for this particular use. Happy to answer any other questions.
Sorry. That's it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I do have some questions for staff.
Okay, please, if you could take a seat, if something else pops up. Supervisor Galvin.
Thank you so much for your presentation earlier today and indicating that staff recommends approval. The Planning Commission recommended approval with just one dissenting vote. There was a question earlier raised by one of the speakers regarding water and will serve, saying, hey, the water company says they have a will serve letter. Can you please clear that up, what that exactly means?
Sure. As development comes in, the applicants will need to show us where their utilities are coming from. We have our policy for urban infrastructure for urban development. That would include water and wastewater. They reach out and they inform us where their utilities are coming from. We also get them to provide us authentication of the ability for that property or that utility to serve them. At the time of specific development, we will need them to show us that there is capacity for that service and where that infrastructure is coming from. So at this point, what they've got from EPCOR is their assurance that they can serve water to this development.
Okay. And the other questions I have regarding this item is that today's an application for rezone, correct?
Correct.
We're not being asked to approve a site plan or ingress or egress or the actual uses that have been discussed today. Is that correct?
As far as it relates to that specific site plan that was shown, that's a potential of what could be done. You are considering specific uses. That's why there's a list of prohibited uses. But
Right.
yes, there is no specific development associated with this request.
So an interesting point raised today was about the ingress-egress issue on 174th Street. I'm sorry, I cannot read my handwriting, but do you recall that question that was raised?
I believe the question related to the access and that it was a private easement. So at the time of development, again, it will be sent to McDOT for review and analysis. Typically along those, I don't know what the status of that easement is or what rights this property has to that easement, if it has any at all. But what we would typically see would be a dedication of right-of-way along that side to facilitate the infrastructure for this development.
Okay, and are there any other items that you believe that staff needs to bring to our attention?
Nothing I can think of at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jack, any questions? I have no questions. So Supervisor Galvin, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank everyone for coming down here. I know that is a very long trip. It's probably one of the longest trips anyone in Maricopa County is going to have to take, and several of you have made this trip several times, so I appreciate it. And obviously, I've only been in office for 18 months, but I definitely have not worked on any more items than regarding the Rio Verde foothills and the Rio Verde community more than any other. My district actually encompasses 900,000 people, stretches all the way to Gilbert. But as you heard here today, the population is roughly about 7,000. But these are very important, vital issues. Someone once remarked to me that regarding issues like this, that you have to balance competing interests. And I actually said, I don't think so. What we're doing here, I believe, is balancing parallel interests. And I believe that folks who live in Trilogy and the other master plan communities have to be respectful of the Rio Verde Foothills community, as I also believe the Rio Verde Foothills community has to be respectful of the master plan communities that have been there for quite some time. Ms. Lizzo remarked earlier about my visit up there. That was a wonderful day, and I really appreciated the time and the hospitality that they extended to me. And yes, was I impressed by these horse facilities? Absolutely. Would I support anything that would destroy the way of life up there or how these people operate? Absolutely not. And in fact, I do hesitate to approve or even consider any commercial activity. But I'm going to make a motion today to approve the item, but I'm going to give the reasons why. Because I really want to appreciate everyone for all the emails that they have been sending and all of the points that were made today. These were very good, concrete points that were well-founded, I believe, in reasons of good faith. And for that, I respect everyone who made those arguments. But I have to consider the experts that have advised us throughout this process. Staff recommended approval. They cited evidence and support from McDOT, which is the county's Department of Transportation, from ADEQ, the Planning Commission, which is composed of people who really drill down and look at all of this. They also recommended approval. But to me, this is not a rubber stamp. I believe that anyone who's in favor or against this item deserves to hear the reasons why. I'm going to be making a motion, and I've been taking notes while I've been listening to this. And one of the big, so it's going to be hard for me to read my handwriting, I apologize. But one of the big arguments that I heard today was regarding traffic. And I actually was persuaded on the issue of traffic, because as you can see here on this item, that people will be living almost directly across the street are the people who are asking for and want this. When I talk throughout Maricopa County, I talk about economic development. It's a very big issue for me. But in this aspect, actually, economic development / tax revenue / jobs is not the game changer for me here. I don't think any project up here needs to hinge upon jobs / economic development. It's about necessity. And I do believe there's a necessity here for the master plan community. But at the same time, as people pointed out, that there's a Rio Verde foothills lifestyle. And would I approve a project like this next to one of the beautiful horse facilities I've been able to visit? Most likely not. Because that would ruin their lifestyle. But you already have a master plan community that's located right there. So I do think it's fair that something like this does get approved. Regarding the economic viability, I've heard this, I've discussed this with staff, and what we heard today in the rebuttal does track with the evidence that staff has provided to me. I'm happy that there's an 8-foot wall. I'm happy that we saw design guidelines that will be synonymous with the community. And I think that's very important. I think landscape standards are very important. Someone brought up the fact that, is there going to be enough shading? We're going to be putting concrete there. We're all suffering under this heat island effect. So if a project like this is going to be up there, it's going to have to go through these design standards, and those types of questions will be answered. But today the question is whether or not to rezone the property. That's the only question. And the biggest factor for me is the citation by staff of the overlay of the plan. Since 2005. And it's remarkable how these plans can really be spot on in what they predict and what they plan for. And basically the population that they predicted would be there by the year 2020 literally was exactly right there. And it did contemplate and it did mention this retail need. Rio Verde foothills, folks, this is a quiet culture. I do not accept anything that I believe would ruin or impact or be a detrimental impact in that. I want to underscore that right away. I have been on national TV talking about and defending the Rio Verde foothills. People have said to me repeatedly, and I've received communication from around the country, these people deserved it, they had what's coming to them. I found that to be horrific. And I think everyone in this room knows that even as far back a year ago, that I presented a plan that would keep that standpipe open as of January 1st, and I thought it was just abhorrent to shut that off to the community. So if there's anyone who's been fighting on their behalf every single day, despite a majority of people telling me not to, it's been me. So if there's anyone who cares about the considerations of that community, it's the person sitting here at this desk. But at the same time, I do believe that the folks that we heard today who have proposed and advocated for and want this project, they've persuaded me. And at the same time, I do not believe that the people who will be opposed to the project or against it will be negatively impacted. So in the interest of this community and in the interest of everyone here, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve item number 26.
Thank you, Supervisor Galvin. And before, there's just 3 of us here. I didn't know, has our colleagues joined us yet? I know they were going to be late. I just wanted to know if they got to listen into this or if they're going to be a part of this vote.
Chairman, Supervisors, I checked earlier and still did not have their attendance on webinar.
Okay, very good then. Well, I'll be looking at the person that would have to make a second is sitting to my left, so.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Again, thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate your leadership, Supervisor Galvin, and talking to this community.